So, are you saying that we're approaching a cultural awareness where physics isn't going to answer all of our deepest problems and questions in life?
Yes, that would be my thesis. That would be my thesis. I don't know that people would necessarily articulate it that baldly, but that's I think where many people are.
Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
And today, Cameron, we're going to talk about nuclear fusion. Woohoo. But actually, so we'll get into the technical side of what that is and why that's a headline. But then I have some interesting philosophical questions on the back end of it for you to help us get sorted out. So let's go over what we're talking about here just quickly. Most of the nuclear energy all of it at this point that is produced and that we use is based off of nuclear fission. And so fission is when you are dividing atoms in order to make energy. I remember, I think like in middle school, I had a teacher who wrote fusion and fission has two S's, and you like divide it between the S's, and that's fission, and that's how you remember. It's a silly little thing, but I remember dividing the S's as fission, and then when you're combining it, it's fusion. And nuclear fusion has been possible for, well, a long time because the sun does it and runs on that form of energy. But you need extreme heat and pressure usually to make this happen. And so it has been done in the lab, but usually it has taken more energy to fuse than to hydrogen, in this case, to fuse two hydrogen atoms together than is released by that combination. And so the big deal is not that they've done it, but that they've done it in a way that produces about 150 times the energy that it takes to put into it. So it's not, um, which is, I mean, that's nice. It's not a huge thing in the sense that, well, let's put it this way: energy isn't being created. That's one of the fundamental laws of reality. Energy can't be created, but it's using the energy in readily available resources like hydrogen to produce something that would have no um, or a significantly less amount of
Hmm.
external waste and byproducts. So with nuclear fission, you end up with radioactive material. With fusion, you don't. And with fusion, you can start with hydrogen, which you can get from everywhere from the air to seawater. So anyway, it's a really neat and it is a groundbreaking thing. Now you see the estimates of it's going to be 2060 before this could be scaled up to be used. It's sort of like, oh, we built a model rocket, now we need to build one to go to the moon. So it's a proof of concept, and there are other labs all over the world working on this too. It's a proof of concept, but it'll be a while before this is what's powering the refrigerator in your kitchen. So anyway, neat idea, and we'll just watch and see how it goes from here. So it is a breakthrough, but it isn't probably going to change your life anytime soon. That's my read on the situation.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are saying essentially this is great, but the implications are far-reaching, and it's going to be a while before any of these results show up here. So yeah, but I mean, it's exciting. It's groundbreaking. I don't. Here's a question I have for you, Nathan. As is your read on this? This goes along with your thesis about you know general pessimism regarding the future, because it used to be it did used to be the case that most people would look ahead and they were overly over they're pretty optimistic, and one of the main sources of optimism is usually technological advancement of some kind.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you think that this will play a role in possibly restoring some of those rose-colored glasses to some people?
Okay, so I think it will be seen as that, but I think it's a category error to believe that that's true. So let me parse out a little bit about what I mean by that. So just to back up and capture what you've been saying, which is absolutely true. You and I often talk about the hope from the future largely being based on a technological advancement. And this would seemingly be a situation in which we'd say, look, we have a technological improvement here and discovery that could offset fossil fuels, which a large percentage of the world think is killing us all. And so, yeah, there's hope in that. However, here's my question. Let's imagine. Let's embrace the fact that this is not going to happen anytime soon. Let's just do a little hypothetical thought experiment here. Let's imagine that we have a totally efficient electricity to the point that it is free, even. Let's just go crazy on it. Um, that it's you've suddenly solved that. And now you no longer have a crisis lingering over everybody's heads is like the main backdrop for all of our modern media and news. Like, what then do we do as humans if we don't have the climate to spaz out about? Which we definitely will continue to do this, even if we have clean energy. But I'm just saying, if we take away the parameters of saying, are the fundamental things that we're worried about in life technological? Or even if we have those technological solutions, will that make life better? And history would point to us by saying that's not true. When we moved from horses to cars and from, you know, coal to natural gas or whatever, from uh, telegrams to iPhones, we have these massive increases in technological efficiency, but those have done little to actually stabilize society, or maybe some people would argue have been inhibitors of cultural growth. So, all of that to say is like we can be excited about this, but we also need to, I think, have realistic expectations of what a new technology actually means for the satisfaction of humanity and our relationships with each other.
Yeah. I think we've this is a perennial theme for thinking out loud, and this, of course, this breakthrough gives us an opportunity to go after it once again. But every new technological breakthrough brings with it unforeseen ethical challenges. And this one will too. No matter how seemingly advantageous, by the way, as well. And it's
Yeah.
it's hard to, yeah.
Well, so I think, yeah, everything is getting more and more complex, not just technologically, but the way that that technology is entwined in how decisions are made. And so in the past, most of our technological and energy expansion has been based off of the economic viability of it. So, um, we burned a lot of coal because coal was the cheapest way to produce power, and still is actually in much of the world. I live in a state that vast majority of it comes from coal, and we have extremely cheap electricity. Now, does that have some limitations to it? Sure, but what we're moving into here is energy policies that are dependent more on ideology than on economics. And you can argue one way or the other whether that's good or bad, but at the degree that we suddenly have a glut of very efficient electricity, what does that mean for transportation in the country? What does that mean for individual automobiles? What does it mean for, And so those the social constructions that will necessarily derive out of the policy that will advocate for certain forms of energy, that's probably where you're going to see most of the ethical situations and disruptions, rather than in maybe the ethics of how this energy is produced. So
Mhm.
you just can't change the pricing of energy. Well, you could. You could do it and make it pay for itself as it goes, and that would allow kind of the market and the communities to stabilize themselves at an appropriate rate of change. But at the degree to which you force a change of energy faster than people can adapt to it, there's going to be pretty significant cultural disruption that goes along with it.
Yeah, and I don't know that people are necessarily as optimistic anymore about that, or that that I think the kind of circumspect attitude that you and I have when we talk about these breakthroughs, and again, I think both you and I would be excited about this. I'm
No, this is great.
enthusiastic about it. It's
It's
great.
totally fascinating, and go look at the like the numbers, like, we're talking about, like, at the pressure and the temperature that's being generated in this, that's phenomenal. It's like orders of
Mhm.
magnitude higher than you probably even think is possible, but I forget
Yeah.
what the temperatures are in Celsius and stuff. Incredible. So, as far as an engineering feat goes, yes, we should absolutely celebrate this, and it is awesome. That's cool.
Yeah, and I don't know, Nathan. It's my general feel though that the reaction these days mirrors our own a little bit. We're more in step with the culture on this one, and I think in a good way, because and part of that is maybe we've just come to a juncture in history where we are a little bit more, maybe jaded is not the word, maybe there is some maturity or some at least a little bit of a level-headed aspect that has entered in, because I think in years past something like this would have been greeted with loud cheers of enthusiasm, and people would have been excited, and many people would have said, "Oh, this will change everything for the better." I just don't think that same kind of sunny optimism is with us anymore. I think we've grown a little bit more realistic in our assessment. And so look at that. This is, maybe I'm wrong, but this is me
Well,
actually saying, hey, there's one area where I think as a culture we're reacting probably a little bit better now. We're kind of recognizing, yeah, it's gonna be good, but it will bring with it its own share of disruption, and it'll be a long time before it happens. And there are massive levels of just where we just can't predict what all
well,
will,
yeah.
happen
Well,
here.
so two things. One, and I think you're largely right, but one of them is you're like unintended consequences. This is developed in a government lab whose primary research function is to oversee the safety of nuclear weapons.
Mhm.
So, I mean, anytime you're working in the nuclear industry world, there's a warfare element not too far behind it, lingering in the shadows
Right.
and probably providing some funding. So, okay, we know how to transfer energy more quickly. How's that gone? So whether that's good or bad,
Yeah.
that's out there. There's that. Also, but back around to your point, and I think you're right, is that are we living in the first generation of non-Amish who have significant qualms about the rate of the development of technology and whether or not it's been better for us?
Mhm.
And I think you and I both would say you and I are certainly in that. But I think even as you look younger, we make fun of the kids and their video games and TikTok and all that. But we all know people who have deleted apps, deleted social media, who are
Oh,
making a much
yes.
more
Yep.
conscientious effort to mitigate the impact of technology in their lives. Um, yeah, there's a sense in which we've been promised a lot. Those promises haven't have been have sort of been fulfilled, but has the iPhone made your relationship to your mother better? Those are the types of, um, and a lot of people would probably say yes, and some would maybe say no, it's been disruptive. But those types of questions are very much alive and well in the air. So I agree with you that I think what we're saying here is not necessarily unique. I think, yeah, there's a general vibe. Got to use the word vibe.
You gotta use the
Um,
word, the vibe shift.
yeah, vibe shift.
I think people are getting better at separating the functionality of a particular piece of technology from its actual place in your life or its contribution to the quality of your life. So, take a smartphone. Its functionality is spectacular.
Hmm.
It's an amazing device. Some technology critics and thinkers have even placed it alongside the wheel in terms of its importance. That's and that's probably not too much of an overstatement, actually. But as far as what it contributes to your life, a lot of incisive thinkers have moved to flip phones, and there's
Hmm.
a, I think they call it a, sometimes was the slang still a dumb phone,
Yep.
where
Yep. The
it's a
opposite of the
phone with very,
smartphone.
yes, yeah, it's a very, and it's got very basic internet capabilities. That, I mean, there's suddenly a major market for that. And I think we would all step back and say, well, it has nothing to do. Is there a market there because people have a real problem with the functionality of the technology? It's not working the way they want it to. No, it's actually because it's working so darn well that they've recognized it's an impediment in their lives. That's what's really interesting. So a lot of our technological feats right now, it's not that they are malfunctioning. It's not that they're not delivering on their promises. They are in droves, and it's the it's that those that amazing effectiveness and functionality can actually serve to undermine the quality of our lives. So a lot of people are moving in a more primitive direction or a more rustic direction.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
so
really
so
interesting to see.
so we're seeing promises and categories that we didn't actually need something in. I mean, so it's like,
Right.
Cameron, I promise I'll get you a real dolphin for Christmas. Okay, if I if I
Great.
showed up, yeah,
Yeah.
if I showed up, if anybody has one I could borrow over the holidays, that'd be great. Let us know. But like that would not be a blessing to
Watch
you
out.
if I showed up and gave you
Yeah.
a dolphin. It wouldn't be good for the dolphin or for you. So and that's an extreme example, but I'm saying there are things in like just because it's new doesn't mean it's good. And
Right.
okay, so but this also plays into why is Wendell Berry so popular? Here's a guy who writes books about farming with horses for crying out loud.
Mhm.
And nobody's
He's the
going to,
sage of our age.
yeah, and nobody's. I mean, so if you look at his list of awards and recognitions, and so and nobody reads his books and like, yeah, I'm going to go back to the horse. But I think he's putting his finger on this idea of the complexity of technology integrated in community and what it does um, in the kind of in the interwoven network of everything from politics to ecology to um, neighborly relationships. So yeah, that's that's out there. We're not saying anything new. We're just pointing out that not seeing this as epic is a new thing because we have a bit more measured response to new things.
Yeah, and we've seen amazing technological wonders that again don't necessarily contribute to the quality of our lives. And we've even seen, we're seeing more now. And again, I think this is one cultural trend that I think is good. So I for one am glad that there's a Wendell Berry bandwagon, by the way. So but
And that wagon
even
uses wheels,
convenience.
not iPhones.
That's right.
Sorry, too
Wheels, not
soon.
iPhones. Exactly. And horses and not tractors. But the the even convenience. So there's another word that we can mention here. Not only do many of these devices function spectacularly well, I mean, they absolutely improve the convenience of your life. They give you more and more and more convenience. But that's something else that we're moving away from because there's a growing recognition that if you have too much convenience in your life, it tends to produce in you kind of this apathy, laziness, moral lethargy. It's bad. I mean, there are some things that you should do for yourself. There are some motions you should go through. You shouldn't have everything done for you. You don't want to have a Wally situation where you're all just floating around with all these robots serving you all the time. But so it's interesting that we're coming to a place now where I mean, again, that recognition is growing, especially among younger people, that no, I don't necessarily want more convenience in my life. No, I don't necessarily want everything done for me instantaneously because it's warping my mental faculties. And a lot of these good neurological muscles are in atrophy. I actually have to learn to do something myself. It's
So
interesting.
on
I
that,
find that strange, but great.
yeah, and it's not. I guess it's not totally new. So I'm thinking here of I have a great aunt who is in her mid 90s, lives in central New York, actually close to Cornell, and she and her husband um, were probably part of the crunchier movement of the 60s and 70s and whatnot. But they ran a farm school for what my grandpa called rich poor kids, where Ivy League students would pay them to come work on their farm for the summer and learn how to grow a garden and shear sheep and milk a cow and all this. And my grandpa, so brother and sister here, just thought it was the funniest thing ever that there were people paying to come do their farm work for them.
Yep.
So I think there always has been a little bit of that. Like, how do we figure out what is like? How do we use ourselves well? And that's and like that funny idea about the guy who said he had to get a second job to pay for all of his labor saving devices. There is a sense in which we can get around to too much convenience in the wrong categories doesn't actually bring us more freedom. Or the question is, so what do we do with all of our extra time now that we have all these modern conveniences to save us time? What do we do with that time? And most of us are not using the extra 4 hours a day that we have because of modern conveniences to look for a cure for cancer. Most of that goes to YouTube. I don't know, but
Entertainment. It
yeah,
it does.
entertainment.
It's
Yeah.
entertainment. Yeah. I think a word that crops up over and over again now is holistic. And it's not just, I mean, more and more people are using that word. It's, you know, and I think there's again, there seems to be a growing recognition that of for the, that the importance of an integrated life where your pursuits really flow from an overall coherence. I'm not making much sense here, but that
No.
there's a unity to what you do and you're
Okay.
not living this kind of fragmented, fractured life anymore.
All right. Well, let me prove your point to you. Do you know the title of Wendell Berry's most recent book?
Right. Yeah, of
The
course.
Need to Be Whole. I mean,
Yeah,
so
right.
you're when you said he's the sage of the age, there's a little bit of a yeah, he's popular because he's putting his finger on a craving that's actually there. Well, let me help me pivot here because if we're right in our analysis, what does that say for the future of the church? And I would see this as a sign of hopefulness for
Oh, yes. Yeah.
community fellowship, worship, work, integration, um, not total reverse globalization, but a focus on what is proximate and where we actually have power to exercise and thinking about how we use what we have well. Um, Spitball on that one a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the longing, the need to be whole, the longing to be whole, using the word holistic a lot. I think really what it has to do is living, actually getting out and living and doing things, as opposed to, I mean, so much of the life of technology, so much of it really is a kind of fantasy. It's not all bad, but you're either immersed in some kind of a distant world, whether it's a video game, whether it's a movie, whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's TikTok, whatever it is. I mean, you're these are all passive experiences for the most part. There's some
Mhm,
activity in them. And I know that video games is a more complex discussion. I think there's room to talk about video games as an actual art form and all of that. So I just want to say that in case some of our listeners are gamers. I get that. But I'm just saying that these are pursuits that are passive in the sense that you're usually, sitting around somewhere doing this. You're in your living room or you're stationary, as opposed to actually being with human beings and having real interactions. There's a hunger and a craving for that again. We're finding, and I do see this as a real sign of life in our culture and a sign of life for those of us in the church. Because Nathan, as you and I are finding, even the changing face of frontline ministry right now, a lot of the events that we do are looking different too. Many of them are more intimate gatherings. They're smaller. It's groups of people. It's not so much a big conference. It's you in somebody's home. We're getting ready for an event that looks a lot like this right now, actually, coming up in
mhm.
January. But you're in somebody's home, and it's not just about you giving some monologue on a big stage, but you're actually talking to people in between. You're having meals together. That is a really good development.
Yeah,
Smaller, more intimate, more conversational, human interaction.
well, and it's
So, yeah,
also
I
an
think there are some
unwillingness
really good signs here.
yeah, it's also an unwillingness to embrace the validity of an idea that's being taught if the teacher isn't actually committed to it. And so
Right. Yeah.
that's a new level of educational necessity there where it isn't just the transformation of book knowledge or ideas or concepts, but in that pursuit of living well, you're looking for practitioners in addition to those who have pedagogical skill in articulating how to do that. So, yeah, I think that's good. I think that is perfectly modeled for us in the life of Christ. And we harp on that all the time. The means and the method and the message have to be commensurate in the way that they go together. But we've come a long way from nuclear fusion here, and it turns out that our that our if I want to summarize where we're at is that our summary of our response to nuclear fusion is that it actually has a less what's the word I'm looking for here? We're less enthralled with it than than we would have been 20 years ago. Is that our thesis? Because
I
we
think
see it
so. I
as
mean,
providing energy, but nothing more than that. Like we're not looking at it necessarily as a source of hope.
if you had to see some grand hope attached to it, my guess would be that some people would see this as a possible way to at least mitigate the looming ecological disasters that we're dealing with. I think if you have any high hopes attached to it, that's probably what they look like. But even there, if you look at some of the literature on, you know, climate change and all of that, I would I would guess, and you'd be a better person to answer this, Nathan, that it would be maybe hope would be too strong of a word. The general tone is often quite pessimistic. But yeah, so if there is some sort of big hope attached to this, it would be along the lines of sort of redressing some of the massive damage done to the planet. It wouldn't be. Even that's new. In the past, I think the real hope would be, oh, this is just going to revolutionize our lives and make everything easier and more convenient. I don't think that's what people want.
No, because you already
By and
have
large,
electricity that's very cheap comparatively.
you already have it. Yeah. And we're miserable. That's the elephant in the room. We have all of that. It's delivered on its promises in droves, and our mental health has never looked worse, and our suicide rates are surging. And so obviously that's an oversimplification, but something isn't working. Something's drastically wrong. But I think the big hopes attached to this breakthrough would really have to do with ecological disasters, not in changing, making human life more convenient and easy. I don't think people want that.
So, are you saying that we're approaching a cultural awareness where physics isn't going to answer all of our deepest problems and questions in life?
Yes, that would be my thesis. That would be my thesis. I don't know that people would necessarily articulate it that baldly, but that's, I think, where many people are.
Yeah, well, and I see that
Yeah,
as a great thing, not because I'm like
it's a
down
good
on
thing.
physics. Yeah, that's like appreciate it for what it is, but don't expect more out of it than what it is. Um, good starting spot. So,
I think
yeah,
so.
overall, I think we're optimistic here about what the response to this has meant. Now, there are going to be people of like, oh, this isn't happening fast enough, and the global warming is going to raise more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, and it's all going to be destroyed before the time we upscale this, and it won't reach Biden's climate agenda of going, fossil fuel free by 2050 and all that. So, yeah, there will be people who are lamenting it around that. But I think Cameron's right. Hope he is that this is great and that we're at a place culturally where we can contextualize and appreciate it for what it is, but not hope for it to be more than what it can actually promise. And that seems to be a sign of maturity, I think, and a sign that we're starting to wrestle with bigger and, dare I say, more foundational principles than nuclear fusion. Uh, the building block of reality is not subatomic, it is not physical. As Christians, we believe that spirit precedes matter. And so when we get into the material working of the world, we delight in it and we appreciate it, but we see that there are even deeper and more wondrous things that underlie all of that. And so we appreciate the material in light of that. We don't hope for the spiritual blessing to come out of the material. And that totally changes the way that we interact with some of these stories. You've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.